was among the winners. That means, as the world was becoming one world community, actually the world was being divided between two strong ideologies, which is what we call more Hellenism. This is what our founders said. Hellenism that gave birth to communism. One with more Hebraism type of mindset. That means accepting religion, the importance of religion, the importance of faith as part of the system. Okay? And on the foundation of World War II, United Nations was made. And then for the first time, the world basically could understand we can become one world community of nations, right? It's only a matter of time before all empires lost their colonies. They could not keep their colonies. The time of colonization was actually gone. That means today we have, I don't know, about 200 nations or so in the United Nations, and each has the same equal value. In other words, the world is like a family of nations. And many people think the United Nations should become like a government, a world government. Some people was, I think, someone was telling me about I think we discussed about that.
But we need the third form.
Right, that's right, we need the form, that's right. So that's why, it's not fulfilling this role. I'm just saying there's some idea that we are a world family of nations, and we could become, you know, one world where everybody is equal and so on. But in reality, this division between Cain and Abel is everywhere, including in the United Nations. That means the United Nations is divided, and you have two veto powers, right? Even to Russia, not to Russia, and to China. Right? And so actually, the world evolved into a divided world. After World War II began the Cold War. You have two blocks, and you know all these divisions condensed into two different blocks. And one of them, we can call it Cain type world because it was essentially materialistic, it's essentially even anti-religious. And then you had another one which, although it was not perfect, far from perfect, but still gave faith, religion, a certain, you know, an important place in the democratic society. So the Cold War was a very difficult time, and nobody could see the end of it, actually. Our founder thought, and our founder had planned and said many times, I think it was said in the beginning, the first day, you know, he thought communism will not last. Communism cannot last more than 70 years. He said that since very early. In his mind, communism will collapse. Not beyond 70 years. And I'm going to tell you what happened. In 1985, our founder was in jail in America. You heard, those of you who were on Monday. He was in jail in America because of some, you know, really strange accusation. And he spent 1 year there. As he was in jail, he actually initiated a conference in Geneva. And that conference was about the fall. He said, you have to pronounce the fall of the Soviet Empire. And the scholars felt, how can you do that? Who said, who knows whether the Soviet Empire will fall? That was in 1985. Communism was still very strong. Russia was still very strong. I mean, the Soviet Union was still very strong. He said, you do it now, I tell you, this is the time. And they did it. And actually 4 years later, then of course, you know, it fell down. So that was the end of the Cold War, but still, I mean, the end of the division, but still, a lot of conflicts are remaining. A lot of conflicts are remaining. How to overcome such conflicts? You know, one reason we are focusing on Korea, I just want to make one mention, one point here. Why do we focus on Korea? because Korea is one of the last remnants of the Cold War. And as you know, right, North Korea is strongly communist. I mean, connected to the communist world still. And South Korea very much connected to America. In our understanding, in Reverend Moon's understanding, North and South Korea should reunite. We should overcome this division. But this division between North and South should be overcome by ideology. The Cold War could not be won just by weapons, just by political power, just by economic power. The Cold War has to be won by ideology. We have to overcome the difference of ideology between socialist ideal or communist ideal and Western democratic ideal. There must be a way to do that. Actually, this is truly the idea that our founder wanted to develop. And when he speaks about headwind philosophy, he said we have to move in that direction. Okay. So what I'm explaining here is just some elements for your understanding, but this is where we're going. Then, when in 1991, at that time, the whole communist world collapsed. Then our founder said, we had many talks, and actually he met Gorbachev at that time. He was invited by Gorbachev. He was invited by Kim Il-sung also. He met Kim Il-sung. He met the communist leaders because he was strongly anti-communist, but he never felt we should not win by power. As able, we have to embrace Cain, win the heart of Cain. All his life, he tried to win the heart of the communist world. So he made his foundation in America. He made a strong foundation. He went to America in 1971. And then he started to build up a worldwide foundation of our movement. All the activities of science conferences, of scholars, religious leaders, all of this was done centered in America. But in his mind, he felt, I have to embrace the communist world like Jacob embraced Esau. Like Abel has to embrace, his brother. So this is what he did. And he built up that foundation until he was accepted by Gorbachev. And he sent fighting tools, he created a newspaper, the Washington Times, allowing him to make some foundation in America, and then reaching out to the Soviet Union, Novosti Press. And so finally they had a conference together in Moscow. And that's how our founder was able to meet with Gorbachev, and eventually went to meet Kim Il-sung and reconcile with Kim Il-sung. So this is the idea. But he said at that time, the democracies think that when communism falls, the age of democracy will come, and democratic leadership will come to rule the world. They believe that democracy is a hope for the world, but in fact, when communism falls, democracy will also quickly plummet. In his mind, it's very clear. The democratic world cannot stand on its own today. The communist world has gone down because its ideology cannot stand the reality. But the democratic world also will go down because it does not have an ideology sufficiently able to move forward and bringing together all people. This is why he started to focus on ideology. And that's what I just want to mention a few elements of this, okay, in his philosophy and the philosophy that we work with today. The interdependence, mutual prosperity, universal value, and his vision for a culture of heart. This is what our founder said. The future world will be one of a new culture of the heart. A world of true love, where everyone lives for the good of others. It will be a world of interdependence, mutual prosperity, universal values. Before he died, he made a tour in Europe, and he gave a speech there to many cities. and he said the same thing. He said, you know, if you look at history, human history, we can see different stages of human, world. The first stage is like human beings, we are dealing with instinct and with nature, centering on instinct, nature, the animal world. Okay? And then a new era started centering on the human mind, emotions, feelings. This is our era today. Human rights, okay, where we understand the value of human beings. But he said these are transitions. We are not at the end of it. And we can see a conflict. We can see something is being stuck. Around us, even in the Western world. We can see all kinds of strange ideologies coming. So, this is, a new era, and he said, this era must come when all human beings have to come back to their original nature, he said. Original nature. And focus on God. Focus on God and learning to live for the sake of others. This is exactly what David Hanna was teaching, okay? So I'm just talking about what we are teaching here. In other words, this is in the time of the globalization. How can you live together? Everybody knows globalization is unescapable. Economically, in many ways, we can't escape it. But we don't know how to live together. We don't know how to live together. Religions fighting, civilizations are fighting. How to do that? This is a real issue. And that's why he says, unless you focus higher than religion, focus on God. God is not inside the religion. God is above the religion. God is above the religion. Focus on God, and then you learn to live for a higher purpose, for the common good. That's what he called the culture of heart, the culture of interdependence, mutual prosperity, universal values. So I will just give you a few elements for your thinking about this. He used several terms. True love. This is an era of true love, living for the sake of others. We often use this term. Headwind thought, I told you already. He used this term saying we have to go beyond the right and the left. Okay? We must work from the head. He speaks about Godism. We have to have a philosophy where God is at the center. That means the root of the world is at the center. We have to have a philosophy of parentism. Parentism means when we fulfill our responsibility as human beings, we grow toward our maturity. What do we become? By heart. We learn to become a parent. You become a parent. That means you learn to love your children equally. And the leaders have to learn to love like a parent, because God himself is a parent. When you become a parent, you can understand God's heart, the suffering of God's heart, the joy of God's heart, and then you can learn to live with others. All these terms are used to understand how we should live today. This is, anyway, from his understanding, okay? Democracy is an ideology of brothers. Going beyond the ideology of brothers, we need to seek the philosophy of parents. Parentism. For this, we need a worldview and teaching based on parents. It is Godism, which is headwind thought. So you understand, he used different terms to say basically a similar perspective. What is exactly Godism? The thought that has true love at its center. So this is actually the essence of our message. Frankly speaking, we invite you here to share with you some message which we feel we're not the only one, of course, and we don't pretend that we can change the world ourselves. But we think we should research how to create a culture of heart where all religions can actually come together. What is heart? I think it was mentioned by David. Heart is this impulse that every human being has to seek joy by loving and being loved. Okay? When a child is born, a child needs to grab a toy, and he needs to be loved by his mother or father, right? If you deprive the child, the heart will not grow properly. That means from the time we are born, heart is what allows us to search for joy by loving and being loved. This is a very fundamental impulse. This is a fundamental impulse of life. And from heart we learn true love. Then what is the conscience? The conscience is what guides when we love. We learn to understand the common purpose. It's our moral guideline. It's our moral compass. Okay? Our conscience is what guides us to the common good. To guide us what is the right way. Is it towards true love? Is it towards the good? Or is it just myself? So we need to develop heart and conscience. Conscience is like the light of the heart. That means when your heart is open, then you learn to understand where you're going, how to do, what to love people. Okay? And when he founded UPF, this organization, okay, our founder, he wrote always calligraphy because he was very good at Chinese, calligraphy. He said, what is the motto of UPF? What is the motto of UPF? This one. I don't know in Chinese, but in English that means true love is the fundamental philosophy and principle of the Universal Peace Federation. That means, what are we as an organization? We are an organization that seeks to live for the sake of others, like Abel loving Cain. We try. We're not perfect. We don't always succeed. But this is what we want to do. How to teach, how to go beyond my religion, how to go beyond my nation. When we work with parliamentarians, for instance, we said, okay, very important, we belong to one nation, but how can we reach out to other nations? How we can go beyond ourselves? When we work with religious leaders, we try to organize events where they have to meet someone from another nation. Many people come to our events, and for the first time they meet some people from other religions they had never met before, because they never could. I saw many of the people like this. They met some people of an extremely, sometimes hostile religion, and then they realized, oh, actually he's not so bad, he's a human being. If you have attended some of our international meetings, you can experience this. Because we always try to bring people from enemy nations. I tell you, one time I asked Mr. Shushkevich, he was the president of Belarus, and he was a long time coming to our events as a president, former president of Belarus. And I asked him, what do you think of Reverend Moon? Why you come to these meetings? He doesn't know, he's not our member at all, he's just as a former president. And then he told me, for me, Reverend Moon is a man who has no enemy. This is why I follow him. He said, I saw Reverend Moon so many times. I never saw him consider anyone as an enemy. Anyone. And Reverend Moon was attacked by so many people. He was put in jail, even in America, even in Korea, but he never considered anyone his enemy. That's the foundation of our work, if you will. And this is what he constantly pushed us to accomplish. So, why do we speak about culture of heart? Because heart is the foundation of personality. Heart is the foundation of personality. It's the deepest part of human personality. It's beyond our reason, beyond our emotion, below the foundation for our emotion. So heart is what makes us seek for joy and seek for values. Okay? So through our functions of the mind, our intelligence, our heart through our intelligence pushes us to seek for truth. Our heart through emotion pushes us to seek beauty. Our heart through our will pushes us to seek goodness. If you're a person of great mature heart, you will seek beauty, you will seek goodness. All these people, I put here a few samples. Galilei as a scholar, as a scientist, or Monet as a painter, or Mother Teresa. These people could not reach the level they reached without having a deep heart and persistent heart, because it's not easy to reach that level. Unless you are pushed by the heart, you cannot create beauty. You cannot create such a goodness. That's why heart is the center of culture. Is a center of ethics, of philosophy, of science, and so on. That's why we speak about culture of heart. And when you actually look at the most beautiful buildings, okay, beautiful buildings in the world, we like them, whether they are from Christian or Muslim or Hindu or whatever. When you see them, you are impressed by their, the science behind it. You are impressed by the beauty behind it, and you feel something move in your heart, because behind such a beautiful place, you have the heart of people, who many of them have a heart to God, heart of devotion to God, actually. That's why people love the cathedrals, because the heart of devotion to God pushed them to create something amazing. Okay? This is why we say heart is a foundation for art and culture. But where is heart developed? Where is heart supposed to grow? Heart is supposed to grow in the family. We are meant to learn to develop our heart in the family. Every human being is born in a family, normally, unless it's an exception. You are born from a father and a mother, and you are taken care of by a father and a mother. And you go through what we call the 4 realms of heart. You learn to be a child, you receive the love of your parents, you give joy to your parents, and you're happy from the love of your parents. And then gradually, when you grow with your siblings, you learn to love horizontally, right? With your siblings and with your friends at school. And you learn that to be happy, you need to give others. You cannot just take from others. To share with others. So you learn siblings love. And then you learn, when you grow adolescent and you are attracted to the opposite sex, and you learn a different kind of love. Very close. The deepest love, where you share your mind, your body, everything. All things you own. So all these are part of a training of heart, and also ethical training. The training of fidelity, the training of solidarity, the training of faith and devotion and obedience. All these are, where is it supposed to be done? In the family. And when you reach, when you have a child, then your heart becomes mature, because you feel utmost desire to love your child. Even if your child doesn't love you, you love your child. You cannot stop loving your child. You cannot stop, even if you're sad, you cannot think but your child. This is parental love. That means this is the most mature expression of heart, is parental love. That is why for us, the family is a very important. Unless, if you break down the family, it's like you want to, to have a, I don't know, if you want to make seeds, for beautiful plants, you create a special protected place for the seeds to grow. And when the seeds are grown, you send them to the fields, right? But before they're grown, you have to protect them, otherwise you lose. If we don't keep the family, then human beings cannot develop their heart. That's why it's a very serious issue. And for us, the family has been the center of our concern, of our founders' concern. You understand? This is very important. This is about human beings. But also, actually, if you think of heart, as we understand, we said yesterday, what is the essence of God? From my understanding, you heard it from David. I saw the chart. He said, you have energy, you have masculinity, femininity, but what is the essence of God? It is heart. That means heart is a cosmic principle that is above all religions. If you take the basic value of each religion, those value of love, benevolence with the Buddhists, mercy, Rahim, how do you say this in Rahman Rahim, in the Islamic world? It's mercy. Where does that come? Such a value and virtue comes from the heart, because there is a cosmic heart. This is what truly we believe. Whether you believe in God, whether you call him God or different name, the world is centering on the cosmic heart. That's very important. Very important. So, in order for democratic institutions to be alive and well, we need to have them centering on the heart. Look at the birth of democracy. I'm just I want to say something about democracy, because we say why democracy is actually in trouble. We had two kinds of democracy. We had two kinds of revolution. We had the French Revolution, which was more like Cain-type revolution, without much, which led more to materialism and communism and so on. Then you had the English Revolution, Glorious Revolution, which was born in this country, right? Your country helped create that glorious revolution. That was the foundation for England democracy and American democracy. Okay? So, Declaration of Independence, Je le pomme, liberty, equality, fraternity, equal right. This is the foundation of our democracy. Where are they based on? If you read American Declaration of Independence, we hold to be self-evident, all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. It means the rights of liberty, pursuit of happiness, and so on, is given by whom? By God. But even in the French Revolution, which led eventually to atheism and materialism, in the French Revolution, the National Assembly recognized and declares, in the presence and under the auspices of the Supreme Being, following rights of man and the citizen. Actually, all democracies have understanding that there is a Supreme Being that should somehow guide us. Of course, when the Human Rights Declaration was made, they had struggle at the UN after World War II. Some nations tried to push. You have to mention God in the Declaration of Human Rights. Some said no, we don't believe in God. So they fought. Finally, they decided not to put God. And this is the first article of Human Rights Declaration, right? All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason, conscience, and another spirit of brotherhood. All these key elements are there. But there's no more God, no more the source. So we understand the decline of democracy in our understanding is somehow the decline of spirituality. In other words, when democracy is centering on a higher purpose, okay, then people somehow feel equal in front of a higher purpose. People somehow have a certain sense of solidarity, okay, living for the sake of a higher purpose. But an emphasis on responsibility, duty. But when somehow the idea of God and the idea of spirituality decline, as we have seen in the democratic world, then basically what remains is the law, the Constitution. We are equal in front of the Constitution, but actually, as human beings, everybody becomes the center. Every person is a center. Every human right is claimed for myself. And what do you have today? You have a situation where everybody is claiming, every group, every minority is claiming human rights, and people are just fighting like crazy, century on human rights. Human rights are just fighting each other all the time, all the time. Because, subject and subject fight. Like I think it was mentioned by David, unless you have subject and object, you cannot create harmony. This is why for us it's a very important point. We need to give a new spirituality to the democratic world. That means, that's why even when you listen to our founder, even Mrs. Moon, others, or our work, in our work, we always speak very much about God or Heavenly Parent. Heavenly Parent. Heavenly Parent, why do we say Heavenly Parent? Because God is in heaven. Parent, because heart is the essence of God. Parental heart. Parental heart. That means human beings, we need to learn to develop that universal conscience that allows us to connect to the world and to other people, connect to God and to other people. We're not the only ones to say this. When the Pope came to the Parliament, the new Pope, he was new at the time, 1994, Pope Francis, he came to 2014. He came to Strasbourg. He gave a very interesting speech about Europe. And he spoke about this. I just have some excerpt here. Today, there's a tendency to claim ever greater individual rights, without regard for those of others and the common good of society. Indeed, if the rights of each individual are not harmoniously ordered to the common good, these rights will end up being considered unlimited and will become a source of conflict and violence, which is exactly what is happening. And then he went on to speak about transcendental dignity of human being. Transcendent dignity means connection vertically. And then he gave an interesting example in that speech. He said, you know, one of Raphael's most famous frescoes in the Vatican depicts what is known as the School of Athens. It's Raphael's famous painting in the Vatican. Plato's finger is pointing upward. Plato, here, he's pointing up. And to the sky, we might say. Aristotle's hand is stretched out in front of him toward the world. This is Aristotle, this is Plato, the fathers of Greek philosophy, of Hellenism. Okay? In front of him toward the world. This seems to be, to me, the Pope says, a very appropriate image of Europe and its history. Europe's future depends on re-establishing the vital link between these two elements, the vertical and the horizontal. This is extremely important. This is exactly what we are about in UPF. And actually, you know, our founder, I just have a quote, one of them. If you listen to our founder, if you go to any meeting, she will just speak about Heavenly Parent, Heavenly Parent, Heavenly Parent, nothing else. You know? She said, you must confidently affirm that the survival of humanity, Europe, and the world depends on devotion to the Heavenly Parent. That means, unless your heart goes to the higher purpose, and then you learn to love others, you know, just like Jesus says, love God, love your neighbor. That's exactly what it means. That's the essence of the law. Love God, love your neighbor. She calls it your job. She has a word, she has a term for this, but it means the same. Love God and others. Unless you do this, you cannot solve problems in Europe. You cannot solve. She said at that time, I was there in that meeting. She said, you know, there are two countries creating a huge problem in the world today. Russia, China. Why? Because they don't respect religious freedom. She said, as Europeans, you come on the foundation of a Christian, strong Christian foundation. So you should go to them, these young, so-called younger brothers, she said. As an elder brother, go and tell them, teach them, embrace them. In other words, she uses not the conflict approach. She said you have to, embrace your brother, like a parental heart. This is a parentism. And you know when she said that? That was just 1 week before the invasion of Russia, of Ukraine by Russia. 1 week. She understood that something is happening, And she said, you think you can save the world just by, economy, all kinds of things. Unless you affirm about Heavenly Parent, higher purpose, you cannot solve. I talked with Mr. Destex today about Russia and so on. We also have a lot of, foundation in Russia, in Ukraine. It's very complicated now, very complicated. But unless we deal with the religious world, how to deal with the religious world, we cannot solve these issues. As you know, no conflict has had more influence by religion than this conflict. And between East and West, what do they criticize? Our morals. This is what they criticize. It's all about this. Not all about this, but it has many more things, but this is a very important aspect. So that's why, our founder proposed the Interreligious Council at the UN. Was mentioned also. That was a proposal he gave in 2000. He made a point, 2000, the new century. He said, if we want a century of peace, the UN cannot work cannot be efficient unless you have another body in the UN which is made by religious people. Doesn't mean religious leaders only, educators, cultural leaders, but they represent a civilization, a religion. Muslims, Hindu, and so on and so forth. And they should have a mind to go beyond their religion. But they can guide, they can advise the political leaders of the Security Council. If we had this, maybe there would not be war in Ukraine. Maybe there would not be war in Ukraine. Truly. This is what, this is in the founding message of UPF. When he went around the world, he spoke about this. This is one of the founding messages of UPF as well. Okay? So, I don't think I will go. What time? What time?
16:55.
Yeah, what time? Okay. So let me have to jump over something. Let me finish with some. I will not talk about other things too much because anyway. I just want to finish about why it's important, the family. You know, there's one thing that I remember very well. You know, our founder at that time was talking about democracy and the weakness of democracy. Why it's important, why the family is important. Because the only place where you learn to balance rights and duty is in the family. As a child, you learn to balance, your rights and your duty from your parents, centering on the heart. And this is a place where you learn to, even though you have different positions, you learn total freedom and total equality. In the family, we have different positions. The grandparents are high, the grandchildren are lower, at the table you sit differently, right? Everyone has their place. But the grandfather can play horse with his grandchildren, with them on his back. That means when you love each other, position has no more importance. When you learn about true freedom, true equality, is when there is love. Love. That's in the family. So liberty, equality, fraternity, where you love these values, in the family. That's why the family is a very foundational, very important again. So this is why, and I will finish with a few slides quickly. The idea of the family and the blessing of marriage has been always at the center. You saw when our founder got married to his wife, right? He started to actually organize many blessings of couples, right? Because he wants people to gain the conscience that you have to live for the sake of others, learning to become a parent. It's an ideology. You understand? You need to understand that without the family, you cannot move very far in society. You create a lot of social trouble in society. And then, there were, he expanded this movement very much. And then also, as was those of you who were there heard, I think it was also from David, that, even he said, if you really want to solve conflict, you have the best way, marry each other from different nations. Actually, in this blessing, he had 6,000 couples of Japanese and Koreans marrying each other. These are total enemies. The parents never accepted that. It was very difficult for the parents to accept their child is married with the other nation. Very, very difficult. But these people did this willingly because they understand if you do that, you can solve the problem, the deep problem of enmity between the two countries. He said Americans and Russians should do the same. We should do the same. And even our peace ambassadors, he encouraged them. Of course, they are married already, but he said, show that you support the family. So he had many organizations, many blessing events with our peace ambassadors to support the family. We did that everywhere. I was in China for 8 years. I lived in China. The Chinese were delighted by our blessing ceremonies. I tell you, because family ethics is very important in China. We had many such ceremonies in China. This is in Taishan, the hometown of Confucius. We did many of those because the family is a foundation for society. And it's not just older people doing, even young people do this. In other words, we try to encourage our children to follow the value of the family. This is my son. He was blessed just recently in America, just a few months ago. Anyway, it's not easy for everybody. We're not perfect. We're not perfect families. Many families have difficulty. We also have difficulty. We're not saying, you know, we are perfect people. You know, not at all. We know that everyone has the difficulty of keeping a family together. But we believe that's an ideal, that is a foundation. If we want democracy to develop, if we want our world to develop, it has to be centered on the family. And that's why our founder, when she made big summits, and she made a series of summits in recent years, okay? Every time she brought the top leaders, the president, she said, you have, after the summit, you have to have a blessing ceremony. Everywhere. In Albania, for those of you who were with us in Albania, you know, there was a big summit, and many, even top leaders, several presidents attended there, but the next day, we had a blessing ceremony. Because she said, unless you give leaders of the world the sense how important that is, you cannot solve problems in society. She did this even in Africa. There was a very big summit with the African Union in Niger, okay, with the president. He's the president of Niger, the former one. And then next day, she also organized, together with the authorities, a blessing ceremony. So this is truly a way for us, you know, and I know that this is something, part of something that we are actually focusing on, okay? Not just that, we do many other things. We do work with peace on many other things. We're not just doing that, okay? I know we work with Ukraine, with many other activities, but I wanted to show the fundamental ideology behind the idea of creating a more harmonious world. And that's why, this is my last slide, because religious people have a very important role. She put all her heart and effort in making one temple for Heavenly Parent. And just last May, she inaugurated it, and there will be an opening ceremony in 2025. You know, it's not an easy thing to do. It's expensive, it's a huge, many challenges. It's a very extremely beautiful place, but she said we have to dedicate a temple to Heavenly Parent, where all religions come and truly feel at home under Heavenly Parent. Because religious leaders have a great, great responsibility for the world today. So that's what I wanted to share with you to finish my lecture. Thank you.